The moment she said it, everything inside me went still. I've hated you since the day we met. That sentence landed harder than any slap. And she said it like it was nothing. Like she was talking about the weather. The dining room went quiet. The air felt thick. My chest tightened, my hands froze, and for a second, I wondered if I'd heard it wrong. But no one laughed. No one moved. Everyone had heard her. Let me tell you how it got to this. The candles flickered a little as I carried the cake into the dining room. Not from wind, the windows were shut, but from the tremble in my hands I refused to acknowledge. I had spent the whole day preparing. The kitchen still smelled faintly of almond extract and vanilla. My apron bore a smear of frosting, and my heels pinched at my toes, but none of that mattered. What mattered was that David's birthday would go perfectly. I had arrived early, hours before anyone else. I brought my own cake stand and linens because I knew Brianna would forget to set one out. I even arranged the cutlery the way David liked. Fork on the right, napkin folded in thirds, not tucked. I remembered those things because I was his mother, his only parent. And if anyone would care enough to get it right, it would be me. The room had filled quickly by 6. Most of the people there weren't David's friends, not really. They were from Brianna's yoga class, her Pilates group, and her book club. One woman offered me a polite smile, the kind people give strangers who show up uninvited. It didn't reach her eyes. I'd seen that expression before, many times. David greeted everyone warmly. He hugged Brianna's father and refilled her mother's wine glass without her asking. When he turned to me, there was a pause. Just long enough to let me know my presence was an afterthought. "Hey, Mom," he said. Not unkind. Just distracted. His eyes already scanning the room behind me. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," I said, holding out the envelope I'd tucked a small check into. He took it without opening it, nodded vaguely, and slid it into his jacket pocket. No thank you. No hug. Just a nod. Like I was some distant relative who'd shown up with obligations. Then Brianna brushed past me. "Oh, Elaine, you didn't bring another gift, did you? You spoil him too much." It sounded playful to everyone else, but I heard the bite. Her tone always had a way of making me feel like an idiot. Like a mother who never knew when to stop. I smiled tightly and said, "It's his birthday. And it's what mothers do." She leaned closer. Her breath smelled like wine. "Some mothers know when to let go. But you always did like clinging to things, didn't you?" My stomach turned. I said nothing because what could I say? Her insults were always disguised. Sharp little truths wrapped in polite packaging. I looked around the room. No one noticed. Or maybe they did and just didn't care. That hurt more. The house felt unfamiliar now. The curtains were minimalist and cold. The photo frames on the walls held smiling images of Brianna's curated life. Vacations. Friends. Her children. None of David as a child. None of me. During dinner, I served food and poured drinks. I picked up dropped napkins. Brianna watched me the whole time like I was trying too hard. When I laughed at a joke from across the table, she touched my arm and said, "Oh, Elaine, you don't have to pretend. Just enjoy yourself. You don't need to prove anything." What she meant was, "You're embarrassing yourself." I sat quieter after that. Smiled less. Tried not to take up space. Later, I was chatting with one of the neighbors about the cake. I'd spent hours making it, almond vanilla sponge, David's favorite. Brianna cut in without warning. "Elaine's always baking something. It's her love language," she said with that smile that didn't belong on a friendly face. What she meant was, that's all she has to offer. The neighbor laughed, and I nodded, pretending I was in on the joke. The comments had piled up for years. The helpful suggestions. The jokes made just loud enough. Like when she once told David to stop calling me every day because I needed to cut the cord. Or when she told the children not to eat my cookies because Grandma doesn't understand healthy food. She forgot my birthday 2 years in a row, then laughed and said, "Oh, I thought you didn't celebrate that stuff." She changed David's email password once and told me it was for security. She looked me up and down once before a family dinner and said, "You should try dressing younger. People might take you more seriously." And David? He never said a word. He always gave her the benefit of the doubt. He said I was too sensitive, too traditional, too everything. When I brought out the cake, there were claps. A few cheers. David looked up and smiled. That looks amazing, Mom. For a second, just a second, I felt seen. Felt like I had done something right. Like I mattered. Then Brianna stood up. Her voice cut through the noise. You know what? Since we're all being honest tonight, let me just say it. The room went quiet. She turned and looked straight at me. Elaine, I've hated you since the day we met. That sentence was the final blow. It didn't surprise me. It confirmed what I'd always felt. But the cruelty of saying it out loud, in front of everyone, during her husband's birthday, that shook me. She wanted to humiliate me. She wanted me to break down. And for a second, I almost did. But I didn't. Because I wasn't surprised. Her actions over the years had told me everything I needed to know. I smiled. Well then, I said, my voice calm. Let's see if you'll enjoy what I prepared. I walked to the buffet, picked up the remote, and pressed play. You could hear the hum of the television as it came to life. No music. No title screen. Just a soft flicker of security footage. For a moment, everyone was confused. The screen showed the inside of a boutique, high-end, pristine, the kind of place Brianna liked to shop. I knew that place well because she once asked me to pick up a scarf for her there. She said it was a gift for David's mother. That scarf never made it to me. She wore it to Thanksgiving. Now, on that big screen in their carefully curated living room, there she was. Brianna, in designer heels, looking over her shoulder before slipping 2 items into her oversized bag. She moved quickly, calmly, almost like it was a routine. And then she walked out. No one said anything at first. People leaned forward slightly. Someone coughed. David stared at the screen like he was trying to make sense of it. The next clip began. A different angle. Same store. Brianna again. Same behavior. Take. Glance. Leave. Then came the audio. A recording taken from her car. The timestamp was recent. Her voice was unmistakable. Elaine is so clueless. Honestly, she's just a sad old woman. I pretend to like her for David, but I've been using him since day one. I felt heat rise in my chest. There it was. Out loud. After years of whispers of careful cruelty, she had finally said it. And she didn't even know she had been caught. Gasps filled the room. A wine glass clinked against a plate. One of Brianna's friends looked at her, eyes wide. But the video wasn't over. The screen faded to another recording. This time it showed Brianna sitting on the couch with David's phone. She scrolled, opened my text messages, and deleted them. One by one. Then she laughed. She thinks he forgets to reply. He doesn't even know she's texting. And finally, she looked at the camera, clearly a mirror reflection, filmed by accident, and smirked. I can't wait until she's out of the picture. There were no more gasps. Just silence. I didn't look around. I didn't need to. I felt the tension. Felt the way people suddenly didn't want to be there anymore. Brianna stood frozen, mouth slightly open. Her hand had gone to her neck, to that same scarf she once claimed was a gift for me. David turned to her slowly. What is this? He asked. Not angry. Not loud. Just devastated. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Her face had drained of color. And in that stillness, I finally spoke. I knew it for a while, I said. My voice was calm, even. I just waited for the right moment. Not just for me, but for my son. No one moved. Even the children, who had been playing in the next room, had gone quiet. I turned off the television. The room felt smaller now, heavy with truth. David looked like he wanted to sit, but couldn't find a chair he trusted. Brianna tried to speak. This is out of context. This is old. That store footage isn't even. But she didn't finish. Because the damage was already done. The room had shifted. The ground beneath her had cracked wide open. People began to stand. Quietly. Awkwardly. Her parents looked at the floor. One of her friends grabbed her purse and muttered something about needing to go. And me? I stayed seated. Still. I watched the unraveling. Not with joy, but with a sense of closure. I hadn't come to ruin anyone. I'd come to end the illusion. To speak in a language she understood, exposure. Because kindness hadn't worked. Patience hadn't worked. Silence had only given her more room. She had underestimated me, but I had stopped underestimating myself. For years, I had let her words slip by. I had told myself she was just stressed, that I needed to be more understanding, that eventually she would soften. I had convinced myself that maybe it was me. Maybe I was too present, too emotional, too everything. But watching the footage, hearing her laugh, it was like watching someone else's nightmare. Except it was mine. And it had been mine for a long time. The comments at dinners, the sideways glances, the way she always insisted she handle the communication with David because he's just so busy. The way she smiled at me in public but barely acknowledged me at home. I remembered the time she gave away the heirloom bracelet I'd passed on to her. She said it didn't suit her style. I found it later listed on a secondhand fashion site. I didn't say anything. I just swallowed it. I remembered how she changed the locks when they first moved in, telling me it was for safety. But I never got a copy. I remembered when she told my granddaughter, "Grandma gets confused sometimes, sweetie. Don't worry if she forgets your recital." I hadn't forgotten. I'd been told it was canceled. A lie. And now, finally, I had proof. I hadn't expected it to fall into my lap. But when it did, I knew I had to use it. Not for revenge. For truth. As people began to leave, I stayed seated. David sat down finally, shoulders heavy, his hand resting on the table like he was trying to ground himself. Brianna was still standing. Alone. Her mouth moved slightly, but no sound came out. I stood and walked to the kitchen. I took the cake, the one I had baked with such care, and I placed the cover over it. I didn't throw it out. I didn't smash it in anger. Because that cake was never for her. It was for David. For the boy I raised. The boy who once told me I made the best cakes in the world. I turned to him then. He looked at me, his eyes red. "I didn't know," he said, voice hoarse. I had no idea. I nodded. Not because I forgave him. Not yet. But because I knew he meant it. Brianna took a step forward. "Elaine, you don't have to do this. We can talk." I held up a hand. "No, we don't need to talk. You already said everything you needed to." She flinched, just slightly. Like my calm hurt more than shouting ever could. I walked to the door, opened it wide, and said nothing. The message was clear. It had been 3 days since the party. 3 days since the room fell silent and Brianna's mask cracked open in front of people she had always managed to charm. 3 days since David sat with his head in his hands, watching guests slip out the door like they were escaping a fire. I hadn't heard from either of them. Not a call. Not a message. Not even a forwarded chain email David used to send out of habit. It was silence. And for once, I didn't chase it. I sat at the kitchen table, the same one where I'd once taught David how to write his name. The same table where I'd folded bills late into the night, worrying how I'd stretch another week. The room was quiet except for the soft tick of the wall clock. I should have felt relief. But what I felt was tired. Deeply, bone-wearily tired. And under that, a slow-burning fury I had never given permission to rise before. Not just at Brianna, though there was plenty there. Her betrayal wasn't new. It had just become undeniable. But I was angry with David, too. Angry that it took a public spectacle for him to finally see what I had been whispering about for years. Angry that I had spent so long second-guessing myself, adjusting myself, apologizing for simply existing, just to keep peace he never realized I was the only one fighting for. That morning, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find David. Alone. He looked older. Tired. "Can I come in?" he asked. I stepped aside. He sat at the kitchen table, in the same chair he used to scramble into as a boy, grinning with peanut butter on his cheeks. Now he looked like a man with nowhere else to go. We sat in silence for a few seconds. Then he spoke. "I didn't know she was doing that. Deleting your messages. Saying those things." His voice cracked. Not from performance, but from something closer to shame. I nodded slowly. "I believe you." He rubbed his face. "She told me you were overbearing. That you didn't respect boundaries. That you wanted control. And you believed her." He swallowed hard. I did. I didn't interrupt. I let that truth hang there. Because it needed to. He looked down at his hands. She made it so gradual. At first it was just little things. Then it was always something. You forgot this. You were late. You bought the wrong thing. She kept saying it was easier if she handled things. I stared at him, my son, the boy I had raised alone. And I saw him clearly for the first time in years. Not as a victim, but as someone who had turned away again and again, each time I tried to hold on. I tried to believe she was good for you, I said quietly, even when she kept me at a distance. Even when I knew she was lying. He looked up. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I gave a tired smile. Because every time I tried, you defended her. And I didn't want to be the mother who made you choose. He closed his eyes. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix everything, David. But it's a start. He looked around the kitchen as if noticing it for the first time. She used to say you were stuck in the past. That you couldn't move on. I let out a soft laugh, without humor. Of course she did. Because the past is the only place where I still existed in your life. He looked back at me, eyes wide. Mom, I never meant to erase you. I nodded, my voice steady. I know, but that's what made it easier. Because if you had meant to, then at least it would have been a choice. This was just neglect. He flinched like I had hit him. But I didn't take it back. The truth needed to land. And then I added quietly, this reminded me of the day your grandfather kicked me out. David blinked, startled. I had never told him that story. I was 19, I said, eyes fixed on a spot on the table. I had stayed out late helping a friend. Nothing wild, just homework and cheap pizza. But he didn't like being questioned. When I walked in, he didn't yell. He just pointed to the door and said, then go live somewhere else. And that was it. David looked horrified. Mom. It hurt in a way I never forgot, I continued. And when I left, I told myself that if I ever had a child, I would never, ever let them feel that kind of rejection from me. He nodded slowly, his lips tight. So when Brianna started slowly cutting me out, I stayed silent. I swallowed it. I baked the cake, even when I knew it wouldn't be eaten. I sent gifts, even when no one replied. Because I thought silence was better than being pushed away again. But I was wrong. Because staying silent doesn't keep people close. It just gives them more room to forget you. David covered his mouth with one hand. I'm so sorry. I looked at him, and I saw the little boy who once cried when he broke a vase and begged me not to be mad. I had hugged him then, held him until he believed he was still loved. And I could have done that now. I could have softened. I could have reached out. But I didn't. Because now, the moral choice was to hold the line. I could have yelled, but I chose to remain silent for my son, for the woman I had become, for the years I had spent pretending to be less than I was. And sometimes, silence is stronger than any scream. He didn't try to defend himself anymore. And I didn't rush in to comfort him. Instead, we sat like two people in the rubble of something that looked fine from the outside, until you touched the walls and they fell apart in your hands. David finally spoke again, more quietly this time. She's moved out. Her parents picked her up. She hasn't spoken to me since. I didn't respond. That wasn't my burden to hold anymore. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small envelope. I found this in the drawer. It's the necklace you gave her. The one with your birthstone. She never wore it. He placed it on the table. I picked it up. The chain was still smooth. Still cold. I remember when I gave her this, I said. She smiled, said thank you, and never looked at it again. She told me it was too delicate. That she didn't want it to break. I shook my head. No. She didn't want to wear something that connected her to me. David sighed deeply. I should have known. You didn't want to know. He nodded slowly. That's true. There was a long silence. I'm going to make things right, he said finally. If you'll let me. I didn't answer right away. Because the truth was, I didn't know what right looked like anymore. But I nodded eventually. Then start by showing up. Not for me. For yourself. Learn how to see what's in front of you. And stop giving people the benefit of the doubt when they've shown you who they are. He looked at me and, for once, didn't try to escape the weight of my words. We sat together for a long time. He didn't reach for a hug. I didn't offer one. It wasn't time. But we were in the same room again. For real. Not as strangers trying to smile through discomfort, but as mother and son, finally facing the truth. And for now, that was enough. It didn't happen all at once. Taking back control, I mean. It wasn't a single moment of triumph or some dramatic declaration. It began in the quiet right after David left that day. I sat at the kitchen table long after he was gone, fingers tracing the rim of my teacup, and I finally admitted to myself that I had been complicit in my own erasure. It was time to become deliberate. The next morning, I went to the drawer where I kept my important papers. I hadn't looked at those documents in years. David had insisted on taking over the finances when he got married. "Let me handle it, Mom." "You deserve a break," he'd said, smiling, with Brianna nodding beside him. I had wanted to believe they were helping, but now I saw it differently. It wasn't help. It was displacement. The first document I pulled out was the power of attorney. I had signed it over to David when I had the flu years ago. Brianna was the one who had brought the papers. She'd said, "It's just temporary, just in case you need someone to sign things while you recover." She was polite about it. Too polite. The kind of polite that hides sharp things. I remembered how her fingers brushed over the pen when she handed it to me. How she tilted her head and said, "We just want what's best for you." That phrase clung to me now like smoke. I saw it for what it was, a gentle way of saying you're no longer in control. I took the document, folded it carefully, and placed it in a new envelope. I wrote the name of my lawyer on the front and set it aside. By noon, I had called the law office and made an appointment. The assistant remembered me. Her voice softened when I told her why I was coming in. "We'll help you fix this," she said. And for the first time in a long time, I believed someone. I didn't tell David. I didn't tell anyone. Because this wasn't about them anymore. This was about restoring my name, my choices, and my space. The next few days were spent digging through files. I found old tax returns with Brianna's handwriting in the margins, notes like, "Ask Elaine to reconsider selling this property. It's not practical for her age." She never asked. She just told David it was for my own good. Resentment pooled in my chest. Every post-it note, every red underline in my financial documents felt like a violation. And I had let it happen. My lawyer was quiet as she read through the papers. Then she looked up and asked, "Do you want this revoked?" "Yes," I said, with a calm that startled even me. It took 2 weeks. But by the end of it, I had revoked David's power of attorney. I had reinstated myself as sole decision-maker for my estate. I froze the secondary account they'd created, the one I hadn't realized was tied to my name, but used by them. I also changed my will. That was the hardest part. David was still my son. But there were truths I could no longer ignore. I left him a portion. A fair portion. But I added stipulations. Protections. And most importantly, I removed Brianna entirely. She would not benefit from one more thing I built. The day the papers were finalized, I stopped at the bakery on my way home. I bought myself a small lemon tart, my favorite. I sat in the park alone on a bench, the crisp edge of autumn brushing my face, and I ate every bite. No guilt. No rush. Just peace. Then the backlash came. It started with Brianna, of course. Her text came first. "You had no right to do that. David is your son. You're going to ruin everything out of spite." Then a voicemail. "This isn't just about money, Elaine. You're destroying a family." And later that night, a call from her father. "We're disappointed. We thought you were more mature than this. More mature." As if being quiet while they stripped me of authority was a sign of grace, and reclaiming my autonomy was petty. I didn't respond. Then came David. He showed up at my door. Face red, jaw tight. "Why didn't you tell me you were going behind my back? Why freeze the account without warning?" I looked at him, the man I had once trusted with everything. "Because I couldn't trust you not to ask her first." He flinched. "She's hurt, Mom. She thinks you're punishing her. I'm protecting myself. There's a difference." His eyes narrowed. "Do you think this will bring us closer?" "Because it won't." I nodded. "Maybe not. But at least I'll be standing on solid ground." He stormed off. 2 days later, Brianna called again. This time, she wasn't polite. You're spiteful. You've always been threatened by me. Now you've ruined everything. I stayed silent. You think you're winning? You think isolating yourself makes you strong? It makes you pathetic. That word settled over me like a cold mist. And then it evaporated. I wasn't going to let her define me. Calls came from cousins. Messages from distant relatives, some of whom hadn't spoken to me in years. Are you okay? They asked. But I could hear it in their tone. They had heard Brianna's version. Even the neighbors noticed. One afternoon, Mrs. Kelly stopped me as I checked the mailbox. I heard there was some tension. Is everything all right? Yes, I said plainly. Everything is exactly as it should be. But the most unexpected thing happened a week later. A letter arrived. Handwritten. From David. In it, he raged, softened, accused, apologized, a swirling mess of guilt and defense. At the end, he wrote, I don't know how we got here, but I wish you had said something sooner. I folded the letter, put it in a drawer, because I had said something, many times. He just hadn't heard me then. Now, the silence was finally louder than my words had ever been. And with each day that passed, I realized peace doesn't require everyone to understand you. Sometimes it only takes one person finally choosing to understand herself. They tried one last time. A group message from Brianna came in early one morning. I hadn't heard from her in over 2 weeks. It was sent to me, David, and her parents, as if pulling everyone in would make her more reasonable. We're having a small dinner for David's promotion next Saturday, she wrote. We hope you'll be mature enough to attend. Mature enough. That phrase hit me harder than I wanted to admit. Not because it was clever or true, but because it was familiar. I had heard it 1,000 times before, in different words, different forms. Be the bigger person. Don't make a scene. She's young, just give her time. All subtle ways to say, disappear. Swallow it. Smile through it. But I wasn't swallowing anything anymore. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened a folder on my desk labeled, What They Don't Know. Inside were copies of every updated document. Will, property titles, banking adjustments, legal letters. I read through each one slowly, not to double-check, but to savor. Each was a piece of me reclaimed. That week, Brianna posted photos on social media from the dinner. Carefully staged, meticulously filtered. In one of them, David was seated at the center of a long table. His smile looked tense. Brianna's caption read, So grateful for our strong, united family. I didn't react publicly. But inside, I boiled. Not out of jealousy. Not even sadness. But from the bitter knowledge that she still needed to pretend. Her power depended on perception. On showing the world a version of events where I was the problem. Where I had abandoned them. Where she had won. But she hadn't. And she knew it. Because control built on lies eventually collapses. Later that night, I received another message. This one from David. It was short. It would have meant a lot to see you there. I stared at the screen, fingers hovering. And then I wrote back. I was there when it counted. He didn't reply. A few days passed. Then came the visit. Unannounced. David and Brianna, both at my front door. She wore her polished smile, the one that always made her seem gracious until you listened to the words behind it. Elaine, she began, we wanted to clear the air. I opened the door wider, stepped aside. I didn't invite them to sit. I didn't offer tea. We're worried about you, Brianna continued. This kind of isolation, it's not healthy. Isolation. As if I had gone off into the woods to speak to shadows. As if I hadn't been the one left out of their milestones, their celebrations, their dinners. You changed your will, David said quietly. I saw the notification. There it was. The real reason. Yes, I said. He looked at me, eyes softening just slightly. Was it necessary? I took a deep breath. Do you remember last year when I offered to host Christmas? He nodded slowly. You told me Brianna had already made plans. That it was just going to be the 4 of you. He nodded again. Then why, I asked, voice steady, did I see photos online of a house full of guests? Decorations I recognized from this living room. David shifted. Brianna spoke quickly. We didn't want to overwhelm you. We thought you'd prefer something quieter. I thought I was family. Silence. I continued. I thought a lot of things. That being kind would be enough. That doing the right thing would matter. That being your mother meant I wouldn't have to fight to be seen. Brianna said, "We never meant to exclude you." Resentment surged. "But you did. Again and again. You just found ways to do it nicely." She blinked. "We thought you needed space. You took space. You never asked." David said nothing. They left soon after. There was no shouting, no tears. Just a door closed softly behind them. Later that evening, I found a message from a woman named Carla. She was a friend of a friend, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. She had seen one of Brianna's posts and messaged me directly. "I don't know what happened," she wrote, "but I just want to say, I always admired how much you gave. Some people only learn to appreciate that once it's gone." I didn't cry, but something inside softened. I wrote back, "Thank you. That means more than you know." Then I sat back in my chair, looked around my house, my space, my silence. For the first time, it didn't feel empty. It felt full. Full of decisions I had made, of boundaries I had drawn, of peace I had protected. And then I did something I hadn't done in a while. I opened the blinds. Sunlight streamed in. It touched the corners of rooms that had felt dark for too long. I stood there in the light and realized I didn't need to win anyone back. I didn't need to explain. I had chosen myself. Quietly, steadily, completely. And no matter what they said or how loudly they spoke, I would never lower my voice again. Because I finally understood something. I won't be afraid to tell the truth anymore, even if it hurts.